So at the healing service this morning, as we look at our readings, kind of like, well, where's healing in the readings this morning? And I think the healing comes from our attitude of what we think is fair and what we think is right. Because I think we need healing from that sometimes to let things go. And as Pastor John talked about in the first reading, we get angry about things and we don't understand. And we have a great example from Jonah about when things change and how we don't like the way things go, right? And so something happens and we don't like it, and we get all mad about it. And at the end of the day, does it really matter what we think about it? Because it's really, God's in control. And so we have this great story about, Jonah doesn't want to go to Nineveh at all, and he's going to proclaim against it. He finally does it because he doesn't like the people there, and then God changes God's mind. And now Jonah is infuriated because God decides to save 120,000 people. You think that maybe someone would be happy about that. I hope that people in Nineveh were. But they changed their bad ways that God sent Jonah there to tell them about. And they actually listened. Something to rejoice about, right? But that's not what happens. Jonah's mad. God, why didn't they get spited? Why didn't you follow through and do what you said? I wanted to see them suffer. Because that's what they deserved, right? In Jonah's eyes. And God changed God's mind. And Jonah doesn't understand it. And he gets all frustrated. And it's not fair, right? It's not fair that those people got to live because you said that they were going to be in trouble. Are we ever like that sometimes? Does that ever happen to us? We see something happen and we say, oh, they're going to get what they deserve. They're going to get what they deserve. And then all of a sudden, something changes. And it doesn't work out like that. And then we're angry. We're mad. And we carry that around in us. And it ends up hurting us. And so how this happens to healing is we need to ask God for help to let that go. To kind of give that up. To let God be God and let those things sort of work out and have it and be able to let it go so that we can move on with our lives. The same thing happens in the gospel, the parable that Jesus tells. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like this landowner. And haven't we ever gotten stuck in things of being fair and equal? Because these people, they go to work first thing in the morning. They get hired. They're going to work. They're working all day. And then the landowner realizes, hey, I have more work that needs to get done. I'm going to go out and I'm going to hire people. And he hires people at noon, hires people at 3, hires people at 5 o'clock because he has so much work to do. And he makes an agreement with them. I'll pay you all the same. I'll pay you the usual daily wage. Don't worry. People are like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll work. Come on, let's go. So at the end of the day, call them all together, and that people start getting paid what they were agreed to get paid. And all of a sudden, the people who have been there all day working under the heat and everything else, they get paid last, and they're mad. Why? Well, these other people got paid the same amount. And it's not fair. It's not fair that they got something, they didn't have to work as hard, right? Does that ever happen to us? We look at someone else and say it's not fair. They got something different than we did. But what was the agreement? The agreement was just to work, that you would get paid, that you would get the usual daily wage or whatever else. And so these two stories, seemingly not having much to do at all with healing, in the way that we think about healing as a physical healing, this is more emotional healing and our own mental healing. When we have to check ourselves and find out, okay, are we really aligned in the right way here? Because it's not always about being fair. Sometimes it just is. Things happen and it doesn't make sense and it's not fair and it doesn't, we try to figure it out, it doesn't really work. And so God gives the ability, things, things happen, right? And when we start we need to ask, when things don't go the way we expect them to or the way we hope they will or whatever else, it's not always because we worked harder than anybody else, it just happens. Or all these other situations that we can kind of think back and use these two stories and realize it's not always fair, it's not always equal, and sometimes we just have to say, okay, it's not fair, it's not equal, and I need to let this go so that I can move on. And that's where healing, if we're able to do that, and it's hard to do on our own, we can ask for help, we can work with other people on it. That's where healing sometimes needs to take place. So we can become stronger, to move forward, and to move on, and to continue to live our lives without that sort of anger or baggage or the feeling of inequality that happens from this. So these two stories really are important for us to think about. What's equal? What's fair? And when we get stuck up into that, we can become more sick. And so these two stories really remind us of a different sort of healing, of mind and of spirit, and not so much of body. But healing is all of those things together. And so that's what we can give thanks and pray for today when we're struggling with these things. That healing in all facets is so important for us. So before we begin the healing portion, we'll sing "Great is the Lord." It reminds us of God's power and